Um, I'm going to be very, very, very careful this morning. And I'm going to be very, very careful this morning because I do not want to offend the goddess. Um, I really shouldn't have permitted any men in here this morning. But I take it on good faith that you're in the virtual environment. We can say that you are quite sexless, and maybe we'll get away with it, and the goddess won't punish me, because I'm going to give away some of her secrets. And yeah, this is one of the most incredible places in the wheel. It's just one of the most incredible places in the wheel. There is so much mythology and mysticism and magic that is associated with the beginning of the quarter of civilization. I don't know if many of you recognize this name, Maya. I mean, we understand it in the context of... it's my way, by the way, of spelling Maya. And I endlessly have people who try to change my spelling of Maya so it's M-A-Y-A. I like to spell the Great Illusion as M-A-I-A. And this is truly a goddess. And for those of you that do not recognize it, this is one of the seven sisters of the Pleiades, of the Pleiades. And most of the time when we talk about the Pleiades, particularly in relationship to human design, that is, if we go to rave cosmology and the way in which the whole greater program is oriented, that the reference is always made to Alcyone, one of her sisters, which happens to be the brightest star, and traditionally the central light of the Pleiades. But Maya is very special. First of all, she is the eldest sister. And when we are looking here at the seven sisters, please recognize that we are looking at forces that dominated through the time of the seven-centered being. There's a great transition taking place here. A deep transition taking place in the effectiveness, in that sense, of the chemistry that is here. This is very much oriented to the seven-centered being. The same thing can be said of the wagon, the great bear. The seven rishis, the seven sons. This traditional mystical relationship between the Big Dipper and the Pleiades. The Pleiades are quite incredible, by the way, in terms of their historical impact on the psychology of humanity. You can find references to this star group in just about every culture on Earth. In the traditional writings of the Chinese, the Babylonians, the North Africans, the Europeans, the North American Indians, the Mayans. It is absolutely extraordinary the amount of attention that this particular bundle, it sort of looks like almost like a little beehive of light in the sky, that this bundle has attracted so much attention for so long. We well know, given the nature of the neutrino stream, that certainly there is an impact, an information flow, a data flow that originates from them. In the new age, it's so-called, that we've been experiencing since 1961, we have the advent of all these people that claim to be Pleiadian channelers and so forth and so on, best-selling esoteric books on the Pleiades and what they're telling us and all kinds of stuff. It remains till this day a deeply, deeply influential force. And something else to know about Maya that's interesting, because it's very much connected to the wheel, is that this is where we get our name for the month of May, the Taurian month, and we are going to be looking at Taurian gates, and the constellation of Taurus in terms of its astrological significance on the mystical plane is that it is considered to be the center of everything, the eye of the bull, that in fact it is well, as the mechanics of design put it, it is the core of the cosmic ajna center. It is, I mean, according to some traditions, everything is in Taurus, which is really interesting when you think about it. I mean, according to some traditions, every other place in the wheel is an illusion, and only that place is real, which I don't want to get into, but it's quite a mind bender to start thinking about that. It's all about perspective, after all. The story of Maya, interesting about Maya. Maya was one of Zeus's many lovers, and Jupiter, one of Jupiter's many lovers, and her child, that is her first child, male born, was Hermes, and the thing about Hermes, or any of those kinds of gods, like Mercury, ones who are responsible for bringing transformation to society, that is, bringing the genius and the wisdom of the gods and sharing it with humankind. I mean, Hermes supposedly gave us music and agriculture and all kinds of things to transform the quality of human life, but more than transform the quality of human life, were the engine of civilization. And remember, this is the beginning of, or the initiation of, civilization. Also, something always to keep in mind in this ongoing journey that we're having. Remember, we're talking about personality conditioning. Remember that. I mean, it's really something to understand about. Here we're going to look at a very, very yin principle. As a matter of fact, the worship of Maya, and she was known as the good goddess. And she was the good goddess, and as the good goddess, no males were allowed to serve her. There were no males permitted on her territory. Her temples were free of any yang influence whatsoever. She was as most purely a goddess for the yin as any goddess has ever been. It's perhaps why she is so obscure today. Millennia and millennia of patriarchy and monotheism, which in itself is just a grander patriarchy, removing this incredible power and presence from the consciousness field. We still have, at least in the usage of Maya and the not self-homogenized world, we have what is the great contribution of this force. It's an extraordinary contribution to the way in which humanity has evolved. All of this here in the good goddess, Maya. Yeah. Whenever I did that again, my apologies, I can see it already. Please discount these. I forgot to change them. Because you can see it's UUA for the 20, and it would be UUC for the 8, and UUG for the 23, and UUU. It's all U, which I think is a delight when you think about the second gate. Eh? U, 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 U. Well, yes, U, U, U. First of all, the quarter, and you can see where this face is. You can see that the most of it is in what is Taurus, and then we have, of course, the beginnings of what is in Gemini when we get to the 20th gate. The first thing that I want to begin with is here. There is no other place to begin. Remember what we were looking at last week when we were looking at Janus? When we were looking at these two faces, when we were looking at what that really meant, the beginnings of understanding that the evolutionary development of mind is going to be dependent on the evolutionary development of body, and that this is something that can only be achieved through genetics, it can only be achieved through sex, it can only be achieved through the reproductive and the nurturing program. But the embodiment of that, this is, you enter into this place, and you enter into a place that says, gee, this face says to the previous face. And of course it's stuck with some of it because of the leucine connection. It says, gee, thanks, you have 15 minutes of pleasure, and I have 7 years of hard work. Because that's basically what it's about. That is the burden of the whole reproductive imperative. In order to be able to create the possibility of genetic recombination until we get to a point of the achievement of self-reflected consciousness, is that the whole burden is going to be placed on the yin. Not only is the whole burden going to be placed on the yin, going to be placed on womankind, but not only is that the burden in terms of what the physical burden will be, but the responsibility. Because you see, civilization comes after initiation. It is the whole purpose of the evolutionary process, is the ability to house more and more successful variations of cognitive, self-reflected consciousness. It means that the mother is not simply a vehicle for life, but that the mother becomes the teacher. The teacher. It's one of the things that I rail about. It's one of the things I actively do something about. That is, we live in a world in which female children are denied education. That there are literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of girls who are denied an education. And that denial of an education, all of this rails against what this formula is all about. This formula is very clear. It doesn't matter whether you take two fine genetic examples and you bring them together. If there is no nurturing of intelligence, if the mother isn't going to give birth to Hermes, then all will fail. Because the children will be ignorant. They will be ignorant. I saw an ad on CNN, one of these public service ads the other day, and it was about poverty in Asia. And I don't know what it was. It's something like 120 children, 140 children, or something like that were going to be born in the next hour, 30 minutes, whatever the figure was. It was small. And out of those, 90 of them would never read or write. They'd never read or write. Day in, day out, day after day, endlessly. We have these beings coming into the world, and it's not enough that they are born with parts that work. It isn't. It isn't. They're here to be little Hermes. They're here to bring the light to humanity. They're here to enchant humanity with their genius and their talent and their gifts. They're here to express what the whole process is about. And we're not just talking about any gate here. This is the second gate. This is the place of the magnetic monopole. This is the whole direction of everything. Of everything. This is the movement. And if you could see life, and you could see it in the way in which, I could deconstruct it for you, you would just see bodies flying out of women. An endless string of bodies flying out of women. This is what it is. And you see Maya civilization. This is not about bodies that can simply function on the physical plane. It is about creativity itself. You will not find a more mutative face. Look at these gates. Deeply, deeply, deeply individual, deeply mutative. You know, the 23rd gate. To be able to explain. Wow, is that ever something? I mean, if you've ever raised children, you know how many questions there are. There are endless questions. Endless questions. To be a cognitive being, to be a self-reflected being, how many questions there are? It's endless. And to be prepared, take a human baby. Try to figure out how much it needs to learn in order to survive. It's incredible. It's incredible. And if it has to discover it on its own, it is always going to be a primitive. We have deeply primitive societies on this planet, where there is no stored memory other than oral tradition. That everything has to be learnt over and over and over again. That lives are wasted. How much we can explain now. How much information we can offer. And the more information you can offer your young, obviously the more sophisticated your culture and society. It's that simple. This is the bedrock of civilization, that the burden and the responsibility is on the mother. It's their burden. It's their burden. How many fathers have ever taught their children to read? You know? It's the mothers. And here the whole burden is placed on the mother. Everything. They carry the direction. No one else. It isn't like the yang necessarily appreciates that. There is a great struggle between the yang and the yin. You'll see it when we look at lysine. Because lysine is one of these binary codons, like phenylalanine. You know, just 2 gates. Lysine, just 2 gates. And lysine is the 1 and the 14. What attention that is. The yang at the top. And the yin on the other side. There is this deep, deep, deep dilemma. And the dilemma is whether or not the gifts of the gods are going to be distributed to humanity. I mean, that's the story. You know, to be intelligent enough to master life. To be intelligent enough that once life is mastered, it is not enough. And you see in this individuality, the 8 and the 23, they're very different in the way in which most individual gates operate. They need the attention of everyone else. They are throat gates after all. The 8 is willing to make a mutative contribution. The 23 is able to make a mutative explanation. They need to influence the others. And they're here to imbue every child with its beauty and its uniqueness through love and nurturing. No place else is the promise of the child more prominent than here. And it's not like there is child here. We're not in the quarter of duality. This is about the chemistry that lies within each and every one of us. And specifically chemistry that deeply impacts women. That when that time comes, and that if they are going to have a child, that these forces are alive in them, trying to push things to evolve a higher level of consciousness. Every female carries within her this imperative. It's a deep, deep imperative to transform the life that they carry. And you can see the tragedy on this plane. And you can see why civilizations are different. They're not different because of the achievement of the males that take the credit for the products and services and systems and this and that. It is the byproduct of the mothers that nurtured them both physically and intellectually. Because if there is not the mother there to provide that nurturing, there will be no male to claim some prize. Think of all the little geniuses and, all these wonderful little intelligent beings that emerge on the plane every day, and their mothers can't teach them anything other than where the wood is and where the water is. Where do you think they're going, those people? Where do you think their culture is going? See, that's not what the program is about. And yet, this is one face. And it is the only face that carries this concern. The only one. And of course it has its impacts on the male psyche as well. This will be the tendency in that chemistry where it's active in males, where they will be concerned about, the development of their children. Unfortunately, in most societies, it will only be focused on males. You can see that particularly in India, China. The relationship between the 2 and the 8, we have this gate of literally making a contribution. It's all about direction. But it's more than just about direction. When you look at this configuration, you've got 3 throat gates. 3. This is, you'll notice this as we move through civilization, all of this pressure on the throat. And of course, this pressure on the throat is a pressure to verbalize. just to be obvious. But it's something to grasp about, the purest nature of the goddess's influence is through what can be expressed. It's about what can be expressed. You see, in our most primitive, it is the physical, obviously, that matters. The infant that comes into the world, it is automatically, deeply, deeply dependent on the physical presence of its mother. And this is a physical nurturing. Yet we are dealing with humans. And we know that children, babies, infants, even prior to birth, stimulated by music, stimulated by sounds, that all of this benefits the development of this child's awareness. All of it. See, children are intended to be communicated with. Communicated with. Nobody communicates to children more than mothers. No one. I mean, even the most indulgent male father, as a percentage, it is going to be embarrassing, the difference in the amount of dialogue that takes place. Think about the awareness of the mother. Think about the not-self mentality of the mother. Think about the mother's concerns about her own life, her own problems, all of the things that she has to deal with, her relationship, the material demands, everything else. Yet the imperative here is to see that each female, in essence, gives birth to a potential god or goddess. Because that's really the story. It's really the story. And that what is required is a true contribution, a mutative contribution. Now, a lot of this is just about education. That is, a lot of this is just about needing to learn, needing to have a force that is going to stimulate the cognitive process. It's where we fail on the planet. It is the deepest failure that we have. It's why we have the world that we do. Those children who grow up without education, they are going to grow up in poverty, and they're going to grow up with the pain of disenfranchisement. Everybody runs around and they're afraid of terrorists and they're afraid of this and that. And their solution is to kill them. But they're born every moment. All the time. They're born in ignorance. They're born to mothers who themselves are ignorant and mostly abused. It's not like it's their fault. It's an endless stream. It pours into the world every day. And this is the only thing that can heal it. There isn't anything else that can heal it. There isn't. Civilization. Civilization is the only hope. In the sense that it is civilization that can move us further and further away from, the primal responses that we have as killer monkeys. It is education that transforms humanity. It's evidenced. We see that in our world. We see that historically. We see that societies that invest in the education of their population are societies that have, they may not be perfect, I doubt very much if they ever can be even close to such a thing, but they are at least better than anything else that's around. And it's a byproduct of education. If you cannot read, you're cut off from the world and from life. You're cut off from opportunity. And you see, it is a vicious circle. These primitive societies, no matter how many tall buildings they have, these primitive societies that deny girls an education, deny another generation an education. The wisdom to succeed in life, the confidence, the joy, it comes from grasping the nature of things. It does not have to be profound. But education is a doorway to transformation for our species. It's here. But it is the burden of the mother. And you can see the pain. I mean, you can just see the pain. I have a couple of foster daughters in Bangladesh. And both of the mothers are illiterate. It is a program just for educating girls. And in the villages that they come from, because they're part of this program, it's quite a privilege for them. You know, the rest of the girls in the village, they don't have a chance, and their children won't have a chance. I mean, hopefully these girls will help them in that sense. They can share what they're learning. But it is horrendous. Because you see, there is no other way out. I mean, this is the key to civilization. I mean, you're literally looking at the key to civilization. This is the civilizing face of humanity. You know, this is the mother that will always dream of something better for their child. But if they are uneducated, they cannot deliver unless they're very lucky. And we have to see that this is what it's all about. It's not about, you know, this political ideology or that political ideology or this thing or that thing. It goes back to the basics. Civilization rests in the hands of the mother. If the mother is abused, if the mother is disenfranchised, well, we know what the results are going to be. If we want to change the nature of the world, and by the way, I am not being messianic because I know it will not happen. If we want to change the nature of the world, the first thing we have to do is introduce the universal right to education. Universal right to education. Children don't have rights. They don't. They don't. How many children are discovered to have been abused for years and years and years? Physical abuse, beaten, broken bones, all kinds of stuff. Until any kind of society is ready to do something about that. They don't want to interfere between a parent and a child. You know, it's the parent's property. Chattel. I mean, children are the last slaves on the planet. They're property. They're treated that way. You know, this is where we've got a problem. You know, they want to do all kinds of things. You want to protect the climate? Educate the children. You know, and not just the ones that you can. All of them. I mean, this is a basic right. And it's more than that. It's a law. You got the second gate here. This is the direction. It is the only direction. It is only through education that we begin to expand the potential of self-reflected consciousness. Without an education, you couldn't understand what the hell I'm talking about. The deeper and deeper levels that we move intellectually, all of that, the wonder of it, the beauty of it, how satisfying it is to understand how things work, to be secure in your place in the world, to know how to function. But it's all a byproduct of your serendipity. That you happen to be born in a place in the world where mothers could educate their children. That your society and culture had an infrastructure that supported that, male, female, whatever. But you know, truly that is not a big percentage of the planet. I mean, if you take all of Europe and the United States and Canada and you put them together, and you throw in Australia, just for throwing it in, you don't even have a seventh of the planet. You know? And we live in a global frequency. And our version of the civilized world is deeply threatened. And it's threatened by those that will never have the opportunity to be able to develop intellectually. And it all goes back to the state of women on the planet. I mean, it is so obvious to me that the most disenfranchised group on earth are women. And, it says here in this face that if this is what you do to womankind, then civilization will only go so far, and then it will crumble. You know, who brought down Rome? The barbarians. You know? I mean, we're being overwhelmed by a world of uneducated mothers. Overwhelmed. And they are not giving us Hermes. You know? They're giving us a whole foundation for violence and hatred and despair. We're looking at a deeply mutative face, which means that we are looking at the chemistry of melancholy. As much as the muse is lying here, and the creative spirit is here. You know, this creative work, the shaping and nurturing of a new life. But when one is able to do that, unable, the malaise that is there, the deep depression that is part of the life of most women on this planet, you know, who spend most of their day looking for water and wood, whose children do not go to school, who extend a cycle of hopelessness deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. I was watching yesterday on, one of the British satellite networks, a special on China, the emergence of China. And you get these pictures of Shanghai or Beijing with, they all look like New York multiplied by 3 and newer, and clouded in yellow smog and whatever, and people driving around in Ferraris. And then you get to see that there's 100 million people who are out of work, who are just wandering around the country. And there's 900 million peasants that are living on, practically nothing. That they've got a one-child policy, which means that female abortions are 7.5 or 8 times higher than male abortions. They already have what is, I don't know how they're going to deal with it. They already have, I think for every 9 girls, there's 10.5 boys or something like that. They're heading for some kind of social catastrophe. The peasantry under Mao, they all had health care, they all had free education. And it's all gone. And despite the gloss that you see on the surface, that underneath is, hundreds of millions of beings, who are unable to fulfill the promise that's there for a life. Unable to fill it. Not only are they deeply prejudiced against the female, the whole educational process. These peasants can't pay for their daughters to go to school. If they have they can't. They don't. It's rare. And then we know what happens. Generation after generation after generation, a continuum. This, at best, it simply leads to a kind of endless stagnation where the same way of life goes on for thousands of years. Do not be fooled by the surface. Wherever you look at the rights of women. It will give you a measure of the potential of that particular culture and society. It will tell you right away. And of course it's here. It's all here. And it's here for the now. This wonderful expression. It's about now. It's not about we'll do it in the next generation or the next generation. It's like these UN proposals. Once a year they have the Day of the Child, where a couple of Hollywood actresses go out to some refugee camp, and everybody is, well, we're going to do better. We've got a 5-year plan, we're going to educate 2% more, and you got 40,000 babies that die every day for the lack of diarrhea pills. We have institutions that are unable to fulfill their promises. We are coming to the end of the cross of planning. They're not able to do that. Our global civilization is not able to do that. It is something to be aware of. And you see, when the institutions begin to collapse, the universalization of common education begins to collapse. Schools, universities are all part of the institutions that have thrived during the cross of planning. But they are institutions that are wholly dependent on, the viability of their societies, either private or governmental, and the cooperation from both. See, I've always been concerned about the education of children. I spent a lot of time in my life teaching children. There are certain basic rights. Every child should have the right to a mother that can read and write. That's what every child deserves, is a mother that can read and write. This is what the ninth phase is about. This is what the goddess is about. I know that there's all these different interpretations of this and that about the nature of the female Godhead. And for me, there is no deeper expression of it than here in this vase. And it is the expression, remember, we're not talking about the form principle here. We're talking about the way in which these personality crystal bundles operate. This is for the glorification of womankind. But it also is for the demand of the yang, that it respect that the yin is simply not the vehicle for the transcending genetic movement, but it is the conditioner of its possibility. And this is what is expressed here. To understand that every generation is dependent on its mother. It doesn't matter the contribution of the father. It doesn't. Because the contribution of the father really isn't something that is there until after the first 7-year cycle. Really isn't. It is those first 7 years, and in the case of most societies, when it comes to female offspring, the fathers have very little connection to them. They are part of the mother's domain until they are shipped off to another household, to be somebody else's wife, to belong to somebody else's family. For the males in many of these societies, their daughters are just sort of rentals, that they have to maintain until they can get rid of them, and hopefully they get a good price for them, maybe a cow or something. I take, I'm a manifester. I am capable of really righteous anger. And nothing angers me more than the denial of female education. I can see that it's the whole bedrock of civilization. It's the whole basis of it. And you look at the world around you and you see that any hope that we might have had, because after all our species is going downhill, not uphill, any hope we might have had for that kind of possibility, the universal right to education, the universal right of female education, we're never going to see it. We're not going to see it. And the world is already being overwhelmed by the numbers, literally by the numbers, this vast number of children coming into the world who will never read and write, who will produce children who will never read and write, who will be disconnected from the world of ideas and the world of duality and the world of see, if you don't educate them, this is a life that can never be transformed. It is a culture that can't be transformed. It just can't. You look at the great miracles after the war, particularly in certain places in Asia, like in South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore. Unbelievable what universal education did. Unbelievable what it did, what it was able to do in 50 years. Absolutely incredible. It's just about education. It isn't about anything else. But most of the societies in the world in which we have those generations and generations of beings that are not educated, we have governments that are basically thieves, butchers, power-controlling people. And they do not want to have an educated population because it's a challenge to them. It's a challenge. It's like what's going on in China, I mentioned earlier. They're soon going to be threatened by that. You cannot open up the door to prosperity and education without problems. People will have their own ideas. They will want to take part in, public discourse. They will want to decide the potential of their own destiny. It's what happens when you're educated. You end up with ideas or opinions or insights. Yeah. See, the way in which the personality operates as not self, and the influence of the yang in all of this. This is a chemistry that struggles within us. It struggles. As I said, it's deeply connected to the seven-centered human. And, I guess the best hope for womankind, in a sense, died with the discovery of Uranus. Odd sort of thing to say, but I assume it's true. So, I look here and I see the great treasure. I see the fact that it is truly our direction. This is what we're all about. We're here to be civilized. We're here to be educated. We're here to explain and be explained to. We're here to make our contribution and have contributions made for us. We're here to do it in the now. We're here to be alive and aware in the now in our movement. And that if we do not honor the yin, if we do not honor what their true role is, that the yang may carry all of this mental fire, but it is the yin that transforms it into a life, that gives birth to it, that nurtures it, that stages the platform for its joy of learning. And in that way, societies are transformed, lives are changed. We look every day and we see a world where violence is everywhere. You check the education of those that commit acts of violence. Oh yeah, there's occasionally those that are very well educated. But you take a look and see. It is those that are disenfranchised from society. And it is those that are disenfranchised because their mothers are disenfranchised. It's something to grasp. I have a very deep relationship with the form principle. I'm its messenger, which I find a kind of joke because I'm yang-yang. I guess the very distance gives me a perspective that in some ways is unusual. I'm a 20th gate person, 23rd gate, 2nd gate. I don't have the 8. I have these things within me. And it has always been my good fortune to see the power of the yin. A very intelligent and educated mother, 2 very intelligent, talented older sisters. I grew up seeing that they were my source of becoming civilized. I don't think there's ever been a deeper influence in my life than the influence of my mother. And not that we had a close relationship when I was a child. We didn't. It was just that she carried civilization, her civilization, so well. These are our influences. They are our starting places. They are our points of reference. And so it is here that we have to see that, when we look at the world as a whole, and when we look at the dilemmas of the world, when we look at the nature of the world that we live in, all of the problems that we get to see, the poverty and the violence and all of those things, I want you to really grasp what's at the source of that. Because you see here, the imperative, the direction of this program, it is not succeeding and has never fully succeeded. Now, I'm not saying that it was supposed to, because of course that's not the case. There is no end to hierarchies. It is just the way that it is. But anthropologists and others have tried for a very long time to try to understand what a civilization is and what it is based on. Well, this is what a civilization is based on. This is the key to understanding our evolution in terms of the evolution of the intellectual civilization. The civilization that is not built on the potential of the body as such. In other words, running, catching, eating, making love. But that the civilization is based on the intellectual nurturing of the young. And that it is the burden of the female. So whenever you want to judge a society, whenever you want to see where it's going, look at its mothers. It's been a great privilege of mine over all of these years in design that I have worked with so many women, always more women than men. And there is something I don't take easily to compliments or praise or these kinds of things. But there is something that always touches me and will always touch me. And that is when mothers who have taken in human design in their life talk about what a difference it's meant in raising their children and guiding their children. And for me, that is very profound and moving. Because you see, I see human design as a great civilizing force. I mean, it is an expression of the goddess. It is the Maya. And this civilizing force, rather than creating a social dynamic, is a unique civilizing force. The power of the mother to bring out the potential of the unique and the different in her child. This is as civilized as we get. And it is in this way that we honor the spirit of the Mother Goddess. Well, okay. Hope you enjoyed that. Maya, Maya everywhere. And all of you take care. Thanks for joining me for my morning coffee. And until next time. Bye for now.